Joining us now is our senior counsel for global affairs, former Secretary of State and former director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. Mike, you've got a brand new piece as we're posting, I think, right now on the southern border. Team Biden is nowhere to be found. One of the questions that we're asking ourselves, and when they keep saying they want to get to the root causes of mass migration, we're wondering, are they the root cause for mass migration here?
Jay, we're now months into this problem set, and they've done nothing to respond to it. They ripped the Band-Aid off. They took the policies that we had put in place. It took us a couple of years to get it right, but we turned the magnet off. We had enforced our southern border. We had stopped the humanitarian crisis. We kept our national security intact, and they literally stare at this problem set and say, nothing to see here, folks. They are completely absent from this enormous crisis. I think they think if it just goes on long enough, maybe we'll all forget, but I promise you, the folks who are suffering from this, the human beings that are impacted, the people in Arizona and Texas and Arizona who are feeling this first, and those of us who live elsewhere who will feel it right behind them, we can't turn away. This is an enormous problem, and the administration has to take seriously its responsibility to secure American freedom and defend our borders.
You know, Mr. Secretary, we're hearing from people on the broadcast that are calling from Texas, they're calling from Arizona, but I'll tell you where else they're calling from. They're calling from Chicago. And they're calling from Atlanta, and they're calling from, St. Louis. Because what happens is the traffickers, once they get in, then use the interstate system to distribute their either drugs, the sex trafficking, or child trafficking, whatever it might be. And they immediately get out into the rest of the country. So this border problem is not simply for those on the border. I think it's important for people to understand that.
No, it's very true, Jay. I'll give you two examples, right? I lived in Wichita, Kansas. That's home. That I-35 corridor is an active transit route, not only for the illegal immigrants themselves, but for the drugs and the human trafficking that takes place alongside of that. It will impact people in every part of the United States of America, small communities that will have more drugs, cheaper drugs. This will have ramifications for years and years to come. And as we now see tens of thousands of illegal immigrants flooding across our border, this is truly a challenge that the Biden administration has to take on, and Americans in every community will be adversely impacted if we don't get this stopped immediately.
Yeah, Governor Abbott's declared the state of Texas a disaster area because of this. Anyways, Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Secretary Pompeo, one of those issues too, and your article addressed it too. We now know, and it's up at ACLJ.org, on the southern border, Team Biden is nowhere to be found. So check that out from Secretary Pompeo. That's right up on the homepage of ACLJ.org. But they have now officially, we knew it was coming, but they have officially put an end to the Remain in Mexico policy. We're talking about at least 68,000 people who were seeking asylum, who were told, okay, if you really believe that you've got an asylum claim to make, you have to wait in Mexico, and then when it's your turn to present your case, you'll be able to go through the legal process here. It's different than the immigration process. Now that that's been ended, what happens next? It's already out of control. It seems like those 68,000, what does that mean? They get a green light to come in and wait?
They've been very quiet about this. I assume it's the case that they'll be given a ticket to cross the border freely. That policy, Jordan, just was common. Now, you have a valid claim for asylum. We're happy to process that. We'll get to it as quickly as we can, and we'll give you a fair adjudication. But you can't make a bogus claim, show up in the United States, and then just hang out and transit freely across America and think, boy, I may be able to stay forever, and someday they'll give me asylum, or they'll give me a free pass. That is a magnet. There'll be two things that happen, Jordan. One, those people who are remaining in Mexico under the previous policy will want to come here and demand entry. And second, it's a green light for people in Central America, in El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala to say, I'm going to come up, I'm going to make my asylum claim, and then I'll head off to Denver, to Chicago, or to St. Louis. And one fine day I'll get American citizenship. I understand why they want to do it, but it's not what America does. It's not the legal immigration system that we have in place that's been the perfect immigration system for the United States that allowed all of us to have this wonderful country.
Yeah, it's the immigration system that allowed my grandparents to come in just a generation ago, 2 generations ago. Let me ask you this. There is the border agents, and we're hearing from them, Mike, we're hearing from them a lot, and they're saying that the hard left of the Democratic Party is, pushing for defunding ICE. And what the ICE agents are basically saying, hey, look, they may not have defunded us, but they have hamstrung us. Our hands are tied because it's basically no enforcement. So they effectively have abolished ICE in a sense by their policies that they're putting in place, limiting what these agents can do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I'd go a bit further. It's not even just the far left of their party anymore. This is becoming Democrat orthodoxy. Remember, one of the folks that's described as the far left was their runner-up as a presidential candidate two cycles in a row, Bernie Sanders. They literally want to handcuff our agents. By the way, it puts them at physical risk as well, and that's, their families send them off every morning knowing that they're going to confront people who may well want to harm them. It puts them at physical risk, and then of course it prevents them from doing their jobs. By the way, the jobs that the law requires them to do. This is a de-effectivizing without taking the money away. They're essentially taking away all the tools that they've used for these past 4 years to secure our southern border. It's dangerous, and it's dangerous for our great law enforcement people at our southern borders, and it's dangerous for the country as well.
Secretary Pompeo, it's clear that the Biden administration officials are scared to actually visit the border. They don't want that imagery. They don't want that picture. They don't want that video. They don't want to actually see it for themselves in person. But what they tell us is that, well, hey, we're going to go to Costa Rica. We're going to meet with people. We're going to handle this diplomatically. Now, I think, and you can speak to this, there's obviously a diplomatic component to this. You worked out the Remain in Mexico plan. You had to work on that with Mexico. But if you don't actually go see what you're dealing with, and you're just traveling around, these root causes we talk about, it seems like it kind of hamstrings the ability to actually use the diplomacy.
Boy, there's nothing like really hearing from the people who are most impacted by the situation. By the way, that's certainly our law enforcement people who are tasked with executing this. But they ought to travel to Mexico as well, the country that helped us and worked alongside of us. That policy was negotiated diplomatically with the Mexican government. It delivered good outcomes for the U.S. and for Mexico, and certainly for the people who are being trafficked. You got to confront it. You got to listen. You have to learn. You have to understand it in context. And if you can't do that, if you can't confront it, you'll see precisely what we've seen: thousands of people coming across our border, presenting enormous risk to all of us.
Let me ask, we just got less than a minute and a half here. This problem for the country, how significant is it?
It's very significant. It's certainly an immigration border problem, but it's beyond that. We see fentanyl moving into our country. Yep. We know that there's risk that there'll be folks coming out from just Central America, but others will see a transit path, whether that's terrorists or criminals who want to come into our country. This risk is real. We have a responsibility. The United States government has a responsibility to know who's coming in and out of our country and to secure that border. Otherwise, it's Katie bar the door, and there are all kinds of national security risks that flow from that, Jay.